Basically, synesthesia is when a certain type of information causes some sort of sensory response, I guess you would call it. Some people see colors when they hear a certain word. Color graphing synesthesia is the most common, where you associate colors with numbers and letters, and that's what I have, the boring, normal kind. Um, and also with days of the week and months of the year. So, for instance, A is red for me and just always has been. Words with a lot of A's in tend to seem kind of red. Um, I seem to have like a verbal one too for hearing words and seeing them in a certain way, although it usually has to do with what color the letters are to some extent. I remember being a really little kid and asking my mom why words reminded me of things. And one of them was, why is thank you like fried eggs? Because, and it's weird because I don't remember having graphing synesthesia until I was in kindergarten, but I knew how to read. And later on, like K and Y and U are all kind of like yellow-ish for me, and O is white. So I always thought of like an egg, like with the yolk in it. But she told me I was weird and stopped talking about it. But anyhow, um, yeah, and for a long time I thought it was because of the color of construction paper used in kindergarten. Like, why would I think that May is kind of a pinkish color? And April was purple, and I remember in my kindergarten they happened to use that color of purple on the calendar, but now that I know more about synesthesia, I don't think that's really why it happened. I think it's, it's an association that exists in your brain, and I watched a show on it, they said it's because of the connections between between the visual center in your brain and the part that's processing the numbers and letters in this case. But it could be anything. I mean, it could be certain smells or tastes. I know I saw a show where one was talking about different names tasting a certain way. And she was telling her mom. And my mom thought it was weird enough that, words looked a certain way, but words tasting, come on, that's really weird. But anyhow, I know there are types of synesthesia that I have that are not as pronounced. Like, everyone has it to a certain extent. I think with music, they say that people will associate the lower tones with darker colors. I really only have like a dark and a light with music because I don't have perfect pitch, and I think it's the same as everyone has, only it's more pronounced, or I more actively see it. Another thing is, um, I have to listen to music 7 or 8 times before I get the pattern of it down. And I think it's because I have to visualize it to remember how it goes. And I do visualize everything I hear. I notice that I have to kind of read the words in my head that people say to me, or that if someone says days of the week or months, I have to think of the color in order to process it, and definitely in order to remember it. And I know I didn't know my days and months until I was in kindergarten. So, I mean, associating them with a color might have been almost like a mnemonic somehow. Not that I did it on purpose, but, in order to learn them, it seems like I have associations with them. And when I was 24, 25, I was still in college and I took a math class, and I always make mistakes doing simple calculations. And my tutor was yelling at me, and I said, I always mix up my fours and sevens because they're both yellow. And he's like made a comment, oh, for me they're like blue and brown or something. But he was good at math. So he was like saying that when he added the numbers together, they'd be like a mixture of the colors that the original numbers were. And I said, I never thought of that. So I suddenly knew that someone else was doing the same thing. And that kind of weirded me out because I had never even heard of that before. Then later on, I found out about synesthesia, probably from reading about autism. and discovered like not only is it common, but I have the most common form of it. And the really funny thing is that I guess there are certain associations that are more common. Like the largest single group of people with color grapheme synesthesia sees A as red. I think it might even be up to 57% on one of the combinations that most people see a certain letter, a certain color. And I've got that. And then also yellow C apparently is a really common one, and I've got that. And white O, and I have that. So I mean, I'm the most boring synesthete in the world. And then I guess there's a difference between the high and low synesthete. People will argue about if you're a real synesthete or not. There are my ear quotes because I do them in every video. Like, do you actually see the colors? Well, it's really hard to explain. For me, I don't really see them. It's more if, in fact, if I'm looking at print, I won't see them, and then it's hard for me because I have to think of the colors in my mind to process the numbers and stuff. But if you would say it aloud to me and I'm imagining it, then I would. And I guess that's probably more consistent with high synesthesia, where it's the concept that you associate, where some people you can actually show them a bunch of numbers in a certain pattern and they can like pick out the 2's and the 5's quicker because as soon as they see it, they actually see the color, right on the page. But that apparently is a minority of synesthetes, and I will link to these videos so you can see that I'm not making stuff up too. I just do have a few other types of synesthesia, but they're not fully developed. Like I said, the musical stuff. And yeah, when I took pitch training, I think I was trying to associate with a color. But since it was B, then say they gave me B flat, and I'm like thinking of the color that like the letter is. Maybe that's part of my problem. Really hard for me to conceptualize things, I guess, without a mnemonic, which I don't know about other synesthetes, but I constantly think of mnemonics that are just crazy, but they just work for me really easily because it's just associative thinking. And it's also, synesthesia is associated with being metaphorical or being able to, associate one thing with another kind of intuitively. It's actually really imaginative, which is funny because a lot of autistics are synesthetes, and, we're always told that we're not creative, but actually a lot of poets and musicians, I guess, are disproportionately synesthetes. Nabokov was, and he described his alphabet the way he saw it, and his letters even had like textures and colors, and one of them was polka dotted. A lot of people have polka dots. I don't have those. But he was obviously very, very verbal. And as a writer, even among writers, like there are some that are more visual. And so I just think it's interesting that his letters had so much detail to them in his mind. Another kind of synesthesia I think you can have like an associated picture to go with everything. Like if you see a certain emotion that you have in a certain way, um, if people genuinely have any association like that, I think a lot of people have like a partial synesthesia in that way. I have it with temperature. I always feel like cold is really angry, and I'm really cold sensitive too, and I just hate being out there. It feels like someone's mad at me when I'm in the cold. And whenever spring comes around, it actually feels like amnesty. I had to think about what emotion it was, and it feels like I'm being forgiven when it finally goes away. Not kidding. It's a very distinct feeling. And I think if you don't really have this, you think it's crazy, and if you do, you're really interested in it. You really do have to be a synesthete to go, oh, your you is yellow with purple dots on it. It's fascinating if you have it. If you don't, it's pretty impossible to explain. It's just something that happens in the brain. But anyhow, I'll try to put some links up and you can check out Synesthesia.